When it comes to iconic rifles, few are more recognizable than the Heckler and Koch G36, Germany's replacement for their legendary G3 battle rifle. Its distinctive, otherworldly profile burst onto the scene as the 20th century waned, and has fast become one of the most well-known weapons from the last 30 years. Born out of entirely unforeseen circumstances, the G36 arrived into a world starkly different from what it had been just mere years before. Built not simply to serve the battlefields of today, but to meet the challenges of the wars of tomorrow. Constructed from innovative reinforced polymers and sporting a number of novel features, H&K's lightweight weapon of the future would form the basis of a whole family of firearms to equip the next generation of German soldiers. Developed as a departure from the weaponry that had built H&K's prolific presence in the firearms industry, the G36 has gone on to find use with over 40 nations around the world, garnering both praise and heavy criticism along the way. From the fiercely antagonistic Balkans to the ever-belligerent deserts of the Middle East, Heckler and Koch's forward-thinking assault rifle has etched its profile into our cultural consciousness, though not always for reasons its creators would prefer. So, how did the need for the G36 arise? What makes the rifle such a departure from Heckler and Koch's previous firearms? And why has H&K's futuristic rifle become so controversial? Over the course of the latter half of the 20th century, Heckler and Koch established themselves as Germany's premier firearms manufacturer. Since being founded in the ruins of Hitler's obliterated fascist failure, the once small variety goods manufacturer had grown into a major contender in the world of military arms sales, thanks in no small part to the venerable G3 battle rifle. Developed at the Spanish SETMI Institute, the West Germans had selected the G3 in 1959 as their answer to the then recent NATO standardization of the 7.62 by 51mm round, with H&K chosen to refine and produce the weapon for German service. As should be obvious, the G3 was a major success for H&K, with some 8 million rifles produced over its lifetime, and such a brilliant weapon was ripe for adaptation. While the G3 began its storied service, HK envisioned an entire family of weapons based on their newfound cash cow, a series of G3-derived roller-delayed blowback firearms that could catapult H&K straight to the big leagues. With typical German efficiency, the first of these would emerge just 2 years later as the HK-21, a general-purpose machine gun that shared 48% of its parts with its predecessor. A solid design in its own right, the HK-21 saw some success in sales to developing nations, but whatever fame it might have gained was soon overshadowed by H&K's G3-derived submachine gun, the MP5. Entering service in 1966, the MP5 was possibly the most modern submachine gun on the market at that time, a design which was soon complemented by a plethora of specialized variants for use in any situation. H&K's SMG rapidly gained a fierce profile in the hands of law enforcement and counter-terror units, especially following its iconic use by the British SAS in the 1981 Iranian embassy siege. Quite simply, if you were looking to buy an SMG in the latter years of the 20th century, you bought German. Not content to just bask in the glory of their legendary MP5, H&K soon followed it up with the HK-33 in 1968. An assault rifle chambered in .223 Remington, the round popularized by the American AR-15. It was quite a forward-thinking development, as NATO wouldn't formally adopt the near-identical 5.56 by 45mm round for another 12 years, and while it was far from a complete flop, the HK-33 would never reach the same heights as had the G3 and MP5. Now revered for their manufacturing prowess, H&K was sitting pretty atop a series of well-built and mostly successful firearms, with the company soon setting their sights on their most ambitious project to date, a futuristic assault rifle designed to arm the next generation of NATO soldiers. With the Americans adopting their .223 chambered M16, the West German Bundeswehr, along with the rest of NATO, could read the writing on the wall. The 7.62 NATO round was already on its way out. Seeking to get ahead of the curve, in 1969 the Germans requested a new, smaller caliber weapon that would not just protect an infantryman, but multiply his capabilities, and they had some radical ideas on how to do so. They demanded an effective range of 300 meters, a magazine size of at least 50 rounds, maximum reliability, minimal recoil, simple training and maintenance, and most notably, the elimination of ejected ammunition cases, all in a package of no more than 4.5 kilos. Enterprising as they are, H&K accepted the nigh-impossible challenge, undertaking what was considered a quantum leap forward over conventional firearms. But developing this ambitious new rifle, designated the G11, was far from easy, eventually occupying them for the next 2 decades. Working in conjunction with ammunition experts Dynamite Nobel and optical sight manufacturer Hensoldt Wetzlar, the G11 would slowly develop around the advanced 4.73 by 33mm caseless ammunition, while the program was kept afloat by funding from the West German government. By 1977, NATO was fully on the hunt for smaller caliber ammunition to, at the time, complement the 7.62 NATO round, with the G11 and its caseless ammunition submitted for testing. Unfortunately for H&K, the G11 prototype was such a disaster in these tests that the West German government pulled out of the project, leaving H&K to continue on their own dime. By the dawn of the 80s though, the weapon's fortunes were changing. The 10th prototype of the rifle had resolved enough issues that the West German government was back on board, and a large sale of the new, though short-lived, HK G41 assault rifle provided a vital lifeline to keep the G11 alive. While the rest of NATO adopted the 5.56 by 45mm round in 1980, the Germans continued to bet the house on the G11, and in fact so confident in the project was West Germany that they outright declined to field the new NATO ammunition. Finally, in 1988, 19 years after development had begun, the G11 entered Bundeswehr testing once more as a near-perfected weapon, impressing the military and quickly being prepared for adoption even without support from any NATO allies. But then, just as HK were finally about to get their vindication, fate delivered a decisive blow to 2 decades of revolutionary work. The long-awaited collapse of communism in East Germany, as well as the rest of the Soviet Empire, was a watershed moment for the entirety of Europe. However, the shattering of the Iron Curtain came with some unintended consequences. Germany, with some understandable reluctance from its neighbours, sought to reunify once more. But there was a major problem. So now we get to talk about the super fun and exciting topic of German economics. Despite being the most stable economy in the Soviet bloc, the East Germans were hemorrhaging money, in debt to, ironically, Western banks to the tune of over $12 billion. And if they were the most stable communist economy, that kinda tells you how well everyone else was doing. Something that Thatcher quote everyone likes throwing about.
It's a shame that the IRA...
Anyways, in 1990, the newly unified German state assumed responsibility for the debt crisis the commies had created, and this is where H&K re-enters the picture. With East Germany desperately needing massive investment, budgets had to be streamlined, and one of the first things to go was government support for the G11 right as it was about to cross the finish line. Unable to sell the G11 to the only government that was ever interested in it, Heckler and Koch were shit out of luck. They had no means to recoup the astronomical costs of its development, resulting in the German manufacturer being sold to the British Royal Ordnance in 1991. H&K were back at square one, but similarly, so was the new German state. The Bundeswehr had also bet it all on the G11, and now they were faced with either continuing to issue the mostly obsolete G3, bearing the political backlash of arming its forces with leftover East German AK-74s, or scrambling to find a suitable 5.56 chambered rifle to fill the void they had quite intentionally created. For the Germans, the first 2 options were untenable, so, a fashionable decade late to the party, it was decided that the 5.56 was the way forward. By the time the Soviet Union itself whimpered out of existence, the Germans had put forth a request for a new, lightweight, and most importantly affordable 5.56 rifle. H&K were on the case immediately, submitting their already existing G41, but the Bundeswehr swiftly rejected it, probably sick of looking at the G3 design for nearly 4 decades. Seeing that their cash cow was no longer en vogue, the newly British-owned H&K instead opted to develop an entirely new rifle for the Bundeswehr, and over the next few years, what became the G36 began to take shape. While it's certainly true that Heckler and Koch's new rifle would be a major departure from their previous weapons, notably abandoning the roller-delayed blowback operation used in all G3-derived weapons, to say they were starting from scratch would be misleading. With the purchase of the company by Royal Ordnance, the new HK project, initially labelled as Project 50, would see some influence from British firearms. Design cues appear to have been taken from the defunct Sterling SAR-87, while some mechanical features are similar to the infamous Royal Ordnance SA-80, but the most direct influence came from the Stoner-designed Armalite AR-18, the Project 50 rifle's bolt carrier, and gas system heavily resembling the American design. In line with what the new German state and NATO required, the Project 50 was developed to have ambidextrous controls, a folding stock as standard, and an integral 3.5x optical sight in the carrying handle, a sight which accepts the Hensoldt NSA-80 night vision attachment as standard. The new design also retained the modular features HK had become known for. Other than the barrel, all components can be removed and replaced with another by simply pushing out an assembly pin. Speaking of the barrel though, it was designed to optimize the weapon's performance firing the standard NATO SS-109 ammunition, by way of a 1-in-7-inch rifling twist. But interestingly, unlike the majority of 5.56 NATO weapons, the new HK rifle would not be developed around the M16 magazine. Instead, the Germans developed a unique 30-round translucent magazine, which, in an effort to speed up reloading, included external attachment points on the sides to allow multiple magazines to be clipped together, features borrowed from the Swiss SIG SG550. Another departure from HK tradition would be the materials used to build the rifle itself. Gone were the pressed sheet metal parts, and replacing them were stylish carbon fiber reinforced polymers. Clouded in secrecy, what began as the Project 50 evolved into the HK50, as the Germans rapidly developed the new weapon in a fierce race against the Austrian Steyr AUG to be the new standard arm of the Bundeswehr. By 1995, the race was over. The Bundeswehr had elected to go with the H&K design, designating it the G36. How did it fare against the Steyr AUG? I can't really say. The only info I could find on the testing was that the G36 outperformed the offering from Steyr, so I'll just leave it at that. Designed with low cost in mind, the G36 was the right weapon at the right time, and it prospered where the G11 had failed. Now it was time for the new rifle to face the world. Just before we get to the real-world use of the G36, we should first address the several variants the rifle has amassed in the last 30 years. Although they'd finally moved on from the G3's basic design, H&K was still very much interested in maintaining a modular system with their new rifle, and as they had done with the G3, the G36 would be adapted for several different combat roles. The first of these would be the LSW, or Light Support Weapon variant, also known as the MG36. This is a bipod-equipped G36 firing from a 100-round dual-drum magazine, and notably featuring a heavier barrel for better performance in sustained automatic fire. To fill the role of carbine, H&K offers both the G36K and G36C. Introduced in 1997, the G36K, or Kurz, is a variant with a shortened barrel, a new flash suppressor, and several rail mounts to attach the HK Universal Tactical Light or the HK-79 40mm grenade launcher. 4 years later, in 2001, the even shorter G36C, or Compact, was introduced. An improvement on the Kurz variant, the Compact sports a 9-inch barrel, a shortened stock, a removed carrying handle in favour of iron sights and a Picatinny rail, along with the option of either a 4-prong flash hider or a birdcage flash hider. In addition to these variants adapted for different roles, the G36 itself has been improved several times over its relatively short life. The first would be the G36A1, which featured a reworked gas block, but other than this, the weapon is pretty much the same. The next, the G36A2, was produced at the turn of the millennia, featuring a new red dot sight mounted on a rail above the original integral sight, along with featuring an optional aluminium foregrip and 3 Picatinny rail mounts for various attachments. The G36A3 would come next, replacing the carrying handle in favour of a Picatinny rail and flip-up iron sights, along with an adjustable buttstock with its own adjustable cheek piece. The final military variant of the original G36 design would be the G36A4, a slightly slimmer variant of the weapon which replaced the side-mounted Picatinny rails with M-lock mounts. I should also mention the XM8, which, while not a direct variant of the G36, was developed as a descendant of it, sharing many similar parts and design features. Export models are also available for most of these variants, distinguished by the E or V at the end of the designation. For civilians, HK offers the HK243, a 223-chambered semi-automatic only model of the G36A4, as well as the SL8, another semi-automatic only model designed for competitive shooting, which itself has several variants of its own. This model features a fixed thumbhole stock along with a unique magwell that only accepts the weapon's specially designed magazines, though the weapon can be modified to fire from standard G36 magazines as well. The most recent civilian variant was released just last year, a 22 long rifle chambered variant, also firing only in semi-automatic. In all, the G36 has received a wide variety of variants over the last 30 years. But how did they fare in the real world? Well, that's where things get messy. Following its victory over the Steyr AUG in 1995, the G36 entered full-scale mass production the next year, with the first models of the rifle being delivered to the Bundeswehr's NATO Quick Reaction Force in late 1997. The new German rifle wouldn't have to wait long to get its trial by combat. With the Balkans reverting back to genociding each other following the collapse of Yugoslavia, the G36 was deployed alongside German NATO forces to Kosovo in 1999 as part of KFOR. The most notable usage of the weapon during this now 27-year-long deployment occurred literally the day after NATO troops arrived. The so-called Prizren incident, seeing 3 German paratroopers using their G36s to stop a Yugoslav army truck that had been firing on civilian bystanders. Speaking of conflicts that never seem to end, the most significant deployment of the G36 to date would be in the very necessary and not at all pointless Iraq and Afghanistan wars. The only activation of NATO's Article 5 seeing German Bundeswehr forces deployed to the Middle East with their G36s. Though the weapon would reportedly also find some limited use with the British SAS. On the official side of things, the relatively new rifle was noted to have performed well. But even as early as 2001, rumours were slowly spreading about accuracy and construction issues. By August 2003, the Germans had one of the largest presences of the NATO allies in the Middle East, supported by their newfangled G36, and by 2009, that presence had only continued to expand. However, as they did so, those rumours continued to fester. Tales passed around about how the G36 would overheat in the swelteringly hot summers, or about its inability to cope with dusty environments. But for the most part, whatever issues were claimed to exist were swept under the rug by the Germans, ending up somewhere alongside what their grandparents were doing in the 1940s. That was until 2010, when a German paratrooper battalion clearing explosives was ambushed by Taliban forces in what is known as the Good Friday engagement. For everyone involved but the Taliban, it seems, this was hardly a Good Friday, and the events of April 2nd, 2010 would radically alter the prospects of Heckler and Koch's young assault rifle. What is commonly known as the G36 controversy is an issue that, to my knowledge, has no clear conclusion, but it's an integral part of the rifle's story, so I'll do my best to explain it. During the Good Friday engagement, German forces equipped with the G36 found their rifles overheated incredibly quickly during the intense and prolonged firefight, reportedly after as few as 60 rounds. This is obviously not a good thing. This overheating supposedly caused the polymer barrel housing to warp, which in turn made the weapon woefully inaccurate. Now, this didn't immediately become a scandal, but this incident rose to prominence in 2012, when more reports surfaced of the rifle's inaccuracy in prolonged firefights, and by 2014, the supposed deficiencies of the G36 were all the rage in German political news. Blame would be cast in any and every direction, some blaming the soldiers for having shitty aim, some H&K for inadequate construction, some ammunition manufacturers for faulty casings, and some the German military for requiring an unrealistic set of specifications for their new rifle. In early 2014, the Bundeswehr released a report stating that the issues with the G36 were not the fault of the rifle, but instead the fault of some defective ammunition with copper-plated jackets that were too thin. A revelation fully confirmed by the ammunition manufacturer, though disputed by other ammunition experts. Despite this report from the Bundeswehr, the German Defense Minister, Ursula von der Leyen, would claim that the rifle's polymer design was the root of the issues, declaring that the weapon had no future in the German army, and in 2016, even attempting to sue Heckler and Koch, arguing they owed compensation for providing faulty rifles. Unfortunately for her, the court case would be thrown out that same year, the court ruling that the G36 had met the specifications set out in the contract with the German government, though no ruling was given on accuracy issues from overheating. Whatever was truly causing the issues, it didn't even matter. The G36 was excoriated by the German government and especially in the media, dragging the weapon's name through the mud over issues that to this day still do not have a definitive cause. As of 2017, the Bundeswehr began searching for a new rifle to replace the G36, and as of today, that replacement is set to be the G95, a weapon ironically made by none other than Heckler and Koch. The controversy would see the end of the G36's service with its home nation, but the rifle's story is not over just yet. Hi, Post-Production Harold here. I thought I should throw out my opinion on the G36 controversy just to finish out this segment. Germany since 1945 has focused its armed forces around domestic defense for pretty obvious reasons, and that way of thinking was still very much the order of the day when the G36 was developed. As a result, the weapon was designed and optimized for use in the relatively cool climates of Germany, and not for the scorching hot deserts of the Middle East. So it's entirely plausible that the weapon was satisfactory upon adoption in Germany, but experienced difficulties operating in an environment it was never designed for. Again though, there is no clear conclusion to this issue, especially as there is next to no scientific data on the failures that were experienced. Forgotten Weapons has an excellent video on this topic that I'd highly recommend if you want to learn more, and I'll link it below. Anyways, back to the video. While the Germans have spent the better part of a decade bitching about the problems with the G36 and throwing blame anywhere it could stick, the weapon has remained in service with some 40 nations. The likes of Argentina, Finland, France, Georgia, Indonesia, Kosovo, Latvia, Mexico, Poland, Spain, Thailand and Ukraine all still employ the G36 in some form to this day. Outside of its contentious use with the German armed forces, the weapon has seen combat in the Mexican drug war, ongoing since 2006, the short-lived Russo-Georgian War in 2008, the Libyan Civil War, and the renewed war in Iraq in the early 2010s, along with the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine. In addition to its military deployments, the G36 also remains a popular choice with law enforcement, particularly in Britain, Italy, and Malaysia. Notably though, it seems that no other nation employing the German design has encountered the same issues that plagued the soldiers of its homeland. As with the American M16 and the British SA-80, it seems the G36 has had the same teething issues as most new military designs, though I don't think any other weapon has been thrown under the bus quite as forcefully. Given that the rifle remains on sale, in addition to H&K seemingly remaining committed to developing the platform, it's likely that, despite its age, the G36 will remain a fixture of modern warfare for some more time to come. Even when it inevitably falls out of service, the iconic profile of the G36 will undoubtedly remain etched into culture through its countless appearances in movies, shows, and video games. In all, the G36 has been around for just over 30 years, and despite its tarnished reputation, it might just pull through alright. Born from the ashes of the ambitious though ill-fated G11 project, the G36 has become one of the most recognizable weapons from the last 30 years. Finding use across the globe, the G36 has remained a popular choice for all types of military forces, thanks to its adaptability and a design built to meet the future of warfare head-on. Even today, however, the reputation of the rifle is mixed, thanks in no small part to the massive controversy the G36 became in German service, a stain on its record that, like the issues of the M16 and SA-80, I doubt will be forgotten for as long as the rifle remains in use. Regardless of who or what caused the issues the Germans experienced, along with its replacement in German service, the G36's time as a weapon of war is far from over. and given its instantly recognizable profile, the rifle will likely remain a fixture of our media for the foreseeable future. If nothing else, the G36 was the rifle that saved Heckler and Co. as a company following the sudden and complete failure of the G11 program. And for that alone, I think it's not too shabby. I'll be honest, there was a lot less information on the G36 than I had thought, but I've done my best to create an interesting history of the iconic German assault rifle. There is a lot more to say about how the weapon came to be than it actually being, but regardless, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you so very much for watching, and as always, if you want to learn more, the sources I've used are down below. That's all from me for now, and I'll see you all in the next one.